This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
In California, a deadly fire ravages a house trailer. One 16-year-old girl dies at the scene. Her injured twin sister succumbs 4 weeks later. Then the family suffers another cruel blow when the girl's own half-brother becomes a chief suspect in a bizarre scenario of murder and arson. 1955 was a summer of romance for Maria Bauer and Michael Seymour. While working at a resort near Chicago, they fell passionately in love. But when Maria returned to her native Germany, she returned alone and pregnant. Nearly 40 years later, her son Christoph needs your help to find his birth father, Michael Seymour. When bank executive John Grundhofer arrived at work on November 19, 1990, he became the target of a most bizarre kidnapping. His abductor was overweight, oddly dressed, and clumsy, but he wielded what appeared to be a homemade bomb and demanded $3 million in cash. For nearly 3 years, this unlikely criminal has managed to elude authorities. Perhaps someone watching tonight will be able to identify him. Join me for another intriguing edition of Unsolved Mysteries. In 1990, the FBI was called in to investigate one of the most bizarre kidnappings they have ever encountered. The perpetrator was an overweight, middle-aged man who wore thick glasses and a floppy rain hat. Hardly the profile of a dangerous criminal. Yet that is exactly what he was, made more dangerous by the fact that his scheme was flawed from the outset and bungled at nearly every step along the way. Minneapolis, Minnesota, November 19, 1990. At 8:10 a.m., John Grundhofer, a wealthy, hard-nosed business executive, was approaching his offices. Grundhofer was chairman and president of First Bank System. Appointed in 1989 with a directive to trim the fat, he had saved the bank millions by eliminating more than 2,000 jobs. Grundhofer was a man used to scrutiny, but as he arrived at work that morning, he had no idea that his every move was being watched.
John, you're gonna have to go with me.
What do you mean?
Just get back in the car.
Oh, there must be some mistake. I have no business with you.
I think you do. This is Carl, and you are going with me.
What do you want?
Grundhofer kept his cool. In fact, he was about to spring a surprise of his own. The commotion soon drew the attention of a witness.
What are you doing?
I heard shouting, and I looked over and saw 2 men rolling on the ground. It was at that point I thought there was a mugging going on. So I started to run over there to help whoever was being mugged. And I got about halfway there when the gentlemen had both gotten up and started to act like they knew each other. And so I'd slowed to a walk.
What's wrong? Is somebody sick? You need some help?
Look, you better get out of here.
At first it seemed so unreal that I almost laughed at the gentleman. And then I realized it was real and I was in danger, and at that point I was terrified that I was going to be shot. And I then ran to the elevator.
Just back up and get us out of this garage.
The gunman ordered Grundhofer into the car. It was 8:13 a.m. Just 3 minutes had passed since Grundhofer drove into the parking garage.
Now where do you want me to drive?
Just head east. Just head towards Wisconsin. Hey, give me your arm.
What do you want with it?
Give me your left arm and shut up. See, to avoid any further difficulties, I'm gonna attach this dynamite to you. That way, if you give me any other problems, all I've got to do is push a button.
I think his intention was to frighten Mr. Grundhofer sufficiently enough that he would be very compliant and do what he was told to do.
At virtually that same moment, a passerby in the garage found what the FBI believes was a cheat sheet for the kidnapper, reminding him exactly what he was going to order Grundhofer to do.
I believe that the kidnapper is not really a professional criminal. It would seem to me that if you're going to commit that kind of a crime, that you could basically do it off the top of your head, if you will.
At around 8:45, Grundhofer and the gunman were crossing the state line into Wisconsin, 35 miles from Minneapolis. It was clear that the abductor had done his homework.
Who takes charge when you're not around?
I'd probably be some vice president.
Scott Taylor take over?
You know Scott Taylor?
Never mind.
At 8:57, the kidnapper ordered Grundhofer to pull into a secluded rest area. They were now 46 miles from Minneapolis.
When they arrived at the wayside, the kidnapper handed Mr. Grundhofer a note. Mr. Grundhofer then made a phone call to his secretary, who transcribed the ransom demands.
I am a hostage of a group called Parents Against Drugs.
The demand was for $3 million in various denominations, $100, $500, and even $1,000 bills. Once again, the kidnapper had tipped his hand about his own inexperience.
1 million and 500s and 1 million.
A professional criminal would never ask for a $1,000 bill. You don't exactly take a $1,000 bill and go to a convenience store, buy a cup of coffee, and ask for change. There are too many people that carry $1,000 bills with them.
Officials at First Bank System began preparing the $3 million ransom. At around that same time, the gunman was discovering that he had made a crucial mistake. He had lost his cheat sheet.
Have you got the note?
What note?
The note from the parking garage.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I used a note before. Written a few things down. Are you sure you didn't take it?
I haven't seen this note.
The gunman became more agitated.
Shut up about it. Let's just go.
He forced Grundhofer to hike down a steep slope in a remote wooded area.
You gotta rest a minute.
The kidnapper was apparently so out of shape that he struggled to make the descent. Eventually, the two men reached a spot where a plastic sack containing a sleeping bag had been left.
Wait a minute. Hold. Wait right there.
The gunman moved quickly. He removed the bomb. He bound Grundhofer's hands with a nylon rope, forced him into the sleeping bag, taped his mouth shut. Grundhofer worked for 20 minutes to free himself. When he realized that no one was watching, he went for help. At 10:25, Grundhofer called his office from a nearby farmhouse. The ransom was never paid. The kidnapping made headlines throughout the Midwest. 10 days later, the FBI set up a hotline and published this composite drawing. The response was immediate. A man named John Henderson, who bore a striking resemblance to the composite, was identified as the kidnapper by two different callers. Henderson was a maintenance worker who lived 25 miles outside of Minneapolis. He had never worked at First Bank System and had no apparent connection to Grundhofer.
I was stunned when they started questioning me about a kidnapping case that had just happened.
Over to Minneapolis, John?
They wanted to search, and I told them to go ahead. I had nothing to hide. And they searched my car and my garage and the house.
The FBI requested that Henderson participate in a lineup, even though they had found no physical evidence that connected him to the crime.
Step forward and say the line again.
This is Carl, and you are coming with me.
Do you see the man who kidnapped you in the lineup?
It's number 3.
I had no worries about the lineup because I know I didn't do it. And even though he identified me, I know I didn't do it.
Despite Grundhofer's positive identification, Jeff Rasmussen, the eyewitness in the garage, did not pick Henderson out of the lineup. Nevertheless, the FBI continued to look for evidence. A handwriting sample was taken. It did not match the note. However, the FBI felt that Henderson's alibi was less than airtight. Later, he became the target of a grand jury investigation, but in the end, no charges were filed.
So far, the FBI hasn't found anything, and they won't find anything because I didn't do it.
Next, a family is torn apart by accusations of arson and murder. The story you're about to see involves a brutal double homicide which took place several years ago. To this day, the case remains unsolved, and the family has been ripped apart by accusations of arson and murder. Time may never heal the wounds of this complex case, but perhaps someone watching may have some small clue that could help bring the perpetrator or perpetrators to justice. Willow Creek, California, population 1,000, is situated in the heart of the state's timber country, some 250 miles north of San Francisco. Hans and Betty Hansen moved to this quiet community in 1971, 3 years after they were married. Hans operated a logging supply business in a warehouse next to the couple's mobile home. The Hansen family grew to include 4 children, Donnie and Becky from Betty's prior marriage, and twin girls, Jill and Julie.
Jill and Julie were good, sensible kids. They were a little shy till you got to know them, but they had real good sense. They would kind of be more friendly to underdog people, and they were real popular girls in school. So if a new person came to school or something that wasn't taken in so much by the other people, they would befriend them.
They seemed to view people from the inside. It didn't matter what they looked like or how much money they had or who they were. They were kind to everyone.
For Betty and Hans, life was close to perfect until the night of November 14th, 1986. At around 11 p.m., the 16-year-old twins were in their room preparing for bed. Their half-brother Donnie, age 21, was visiting from the town of Fortuna, 70 miles away. He would sleep on a couch in the family room. At around 3 a.m., Betty Hansen suddenly awoke.
Hands, get up. I smell smoke. Get the kids.
Oh, no.
Jill! Jill! Julie!
Today, Hans and Betty's memories are a blur of fragmented images. But that night, they were struck by several things that even in the midst of the chaos didn't quite make sense.
I shot that fire extinguisher down the hall. it burnt right back up. There was a strip in the middle of that hallway burning. I remember that going through my mind. That's real odd, that coming back in a strip like that. And still, I got no response from anybody. I was yelling all three of their names and then exited the house. As I ran out the door, I kicked the gas can out of the way, not really thinking much of it till I got a few steps away, thinking that gas can shouldn't have been there. It was empty because I felt how it was empty when I kicked it.
I went up the little hallway, and the first person I saw was Donnie. And he was standing at the end of the couch where I think he'd slept that night. And he didn't see me. And he's screaming in a horrible voice. He's screaming, "Get out of here!" real loud and running, chasing. And so right away I was afraid for him, what was happening, who he was chasing out.
Betty ran to the shop where a number of fire extinguishers were stored. She was met first by Donnie, then by Hans.
Hands!
Betty, call the fire department!
When I got to the shop, I got a ladder and came up to Jill's room and just shoved that ladder right through the window. That room was totally in flames, totally engulfed in flames. And I didn't get any response or see anybody.
Hans, Betty, and Donnie continuously returned to the warehouse for fire extinguishers.
Get the call the fire department.
Yes, I did, yes.
Jill and Julie. Have you seen Jill and Julie?
No.
I remember asking Donnie as we were chasing back and forth for fire extinguishers, "Did you see anybody?" And he said no, he didn't see anything.
Fire trucks roared to the scene within 15 minutes. But for Hans and Betty, assuming that Jill and Julie were still inside the trailer, it was an eternity. Minutes later, the Hansens were both shocked and relieved when a neighbor noticed a crumpled figure in a vacant lot across the road.
Julie? It's Julie Hansen. Julie, what happened?
Julie was nearly dead, bleeding profusely from a gaping wound in her stomach.
I'm going to go get some help.
And I heard somebody yell from across the street, "We found one of them," or something like that. Then the next thing, Donnie came running up on the deck, and he said, "We found Julie. Julie's out. I got her out." And my first question to him was, "How bad is she burnt?" And he didn't give me an answer. Of course, I didn't stand around.
Hans claims that it was only after Julie was discovered that Donnie took credit for having pulled her from the fire. But that apparent discrepancy was quickly overshadowed by concern for Julie.
When I saw Julie, I thought there was no way she could live. Her stomach was just open, blown open. And so I ran back across the street, and I just went from one fireman to the other one, begging them to please go in and find Jill. Where's Jill? And then I'd run back across the street and to see how Julie was doing. And each time I went back across the street, I was surprised she was still alive.
Emergency personnel rushed Julie to the hospital, believing her stomach injury had been caused by some kind of fire-related explosion. But in surgery, doctors made an incredible discovery. Julie's traumatic wound had absolutely nothing to do with the fire. Julie Hansen had been shot in the abdomen, virtually at point-blank range with a 12-gauge shotgun.
Well, I about fell off my chair then, because that was the first I'd known anything about any shooting at all. And I still couldn't figure out why. Who could have hated us as much to make an attack on our house like this?
The emerging facts seemed too shocking to be true. Unknown and unseen, someone had apparently torched the Hansen home and gunned down Julie. Daylight brought still more unbearable news. Jill's body was found in the ruins.
Okay, listen, go around the back, okay? Just flare out.
An autopsy would later confirm that Jill had also been wounded by shotgun fire. Unable to flee, she had perished in the flames. Authorities recovered 3 shotgun shells and a second 5-gallon gas can from the ashes, mounting evidence of arson and murder.
Whoa.
The Hansen's warehouse is untouched by the fire, and investigators examined every square inch for clues.
Hey, George! Yeah? Over here.
Shoved behind some boxes, he found a 12-gauge shotgun. Ballistic tests would later prove it was the weapon used to shoot Jill and Julie Hansen.
What do you make of that?
The entire Hansen property was cordoned off and kept under round-the-clock surveillance. Two days after the fire, in the early morning, the officer on duty caught a prowler outside the warehouse.
Hey! What are you doing there?
This is my dad's place. He works here.
Yeah, what's your dad's name?
Hansen.
You didn't see the police?
It was Hans and Betty's son, Donnie.
Hey, watch the light.
You just stand right there.
Detective George Gatto was called to the scene. Donnie told Gatto that he had come to feed the family
I'm
dog.
looking in a window. Looking in the window. What are you looking at, son?
I just came out to feed my dog.
Tell us the truth, Donnie.
No,
He knew the dog had been taken to a neighbor's.
See a dog around here?
Okay. He knew the dog was not there. And that's when we figured that the reason he was there to get the shotgun. Because he didn't know we had found it yet.
The case had taken an incredible turn. Donnie was about to become the prime suspect in the murder of his own sister. Investigators soon uncovered circumstantial evidence that implicated Donnie in the crime. 3 days before the fire, Donnie had borrowed the shotgun from a friend, and Donnie admitted keeping it in his car. Unspent shells found in the car matched those used in the attack. Donnie had purchased the ammunition the very evening Jill and Julie were shot. This credit card statement verified that 2 days before the fire, Donnie had purchased 5 gallons of gas at a local station. Witnesses confirmed that the container Donnie filled was identical to one of those found at the scene.
So then what happened?
There was only one person who might be able to confirm the growing suspicions, Julie Hansen. Approximately 2 weeks after the fire, she had recovered enough to tell her parents what had happened.
I crawled out of bed. Or Joe.
At first, Julie's memories were sketchy. She recalled being shot, but not seeing anyone.
She said she crawled over her sister, which saw her sister was still asleep in the bed beside her,
Donnie?
and stepped out of her bedroom door, and bang, she saw the flash, and she thought a bomb went off, and she said she reached down and felt her belly. It was like a bowl of Jell-O.
As Hans and Betty asked more questions, Julie had a chilling recollection.
So did you see anything else? Did you see anybody?
I saw Donnie's face in the flash.
You saw your brother Donnie's face?
However, Julie's statement contradicted what she told her doctor.
I just saw...
I never found out why she said that she saw Donnie in the flash. She definitely did not tell me that. She told me she saw nobody, specifically. When I questioned her about that situation, I said, who did you see, or did you see anything? She said, I saw nobody. I never mentioned seeing Donnie.
On December 2nd, 2 weeks after the fire, Donnie Hansen was met by his mother and sister at the county courthouse. He had come in voluntarily for further questioning.
Hi, Betty. Hi. Thanks for coming down. What about the shells?
And the shells, we were out trap shooting, and I picked some more up as the store was on the way home.
Don't you think it's kind of funny that you bought the shells right before the murder? What about the gun? Why did you try to hide the gun?
Look, I just got scared, you know? I panicked. I tried to hide the gun in the warehouse because I figured if you found the gun in my car, that you're just going to assume that I did it.
I don't have a right to assume that. I'm having trouble believing this whole story.
He kept saying he was innocent. He failed the polygraph twice. And when I interviewed him, he just
believe you, Donnie.
kept denying everything.
Why don't you believe me?
Like I say, every time it was a different story with him.
The interrogation lasted 2 hours. When Donnie emerged, he was in handcuffs, facing trial on charges of arson and murder.
What's going on?
He's under arrest.
On what grounds?
I can't talk to you about that right now.
George, we are trying to cooperate.
That was a pretty low point in my life, to see my son arrested for the murder of my daughter. It was just unbelievable. And I kept thinking, when am I going to wake up? When's this going to end? It was just, I can't describe it. There's just no words.
The nightmare was far from over. On December 19th, Julie suddenly died in a freak medical accident. An air bubble had entered her bloodstream through an intravenous tube and stopped her heart. Julie's death was another devastating blow to her grieving parents. It was also a crippling setback to the prosecutors. Julie's eyewitness statements would now be inadmissible as evidence, since she could not be cross-examined by defense attorneys. When we return, Donnie Hansen tells his story. In April of 1988, Donnie Hansen went on trial for the murder of his half-sisters, Jill and Julie. The district attorney was confident enough to ask for the death penalty.
The defendant, Donald Hansen, brought the gun that was the murder weapon to the scene. He brought the shotgun shells that killed those 2 girls. He hid the murder weapon, and he lied about all of those things. That was strong evidence.
However, the defense introduced eyewitness testimony from the Hansens' neighbors across the street.
Oh my gosh, it's the hair.
They claimed to have seen 2 unidentified men near the trailer while it was on fire.
I'll go help.
Their sighting became the cornerstone of a defense theory designed to show that Donnie Hansen was innocent.
There were a tremendous number of unanswered facts and occurrences that happened that night that the prosecution couldn't explain and which were not consistent with Donnie having been involved. I was able to come up with at least a suggested scenario that tied all of the unanswered, or the majority of the unanswered, factual questions together.
The defense contended that around 3 a.m., 2 intruders, identity and motive unknown, approached the Hansens' trailer.
The person had found Donnie's shotgun outside and for whatever reason decided to bring it inside with some shells. Picked the lock, came through the sliding glass door. They just spread the gasoline around the living room area at the front of the trailer, the kitchen. He certainly didn't seem to care that people were asleep in the trailer. They went throughout the trailer and spread the gasoline. At some point during the activities of the perpetrator, Julie was awakened. She comes down the hallway and walks in on the perpetrator, who then, at that particular point, apparently was to the left of Donnie as he was lying on the couch and somewhat behind him. And he shoots her as she's coming out the hallway. And she goes down. That's what wakes Donnie up. Donnie picks Julie up, takes her out on the front porch, posits her there.
Julie, okay, you're out. You stay here, I'm gonna let you help.
If some unnamed, unknown, masked intruders are in your house, killing people and burning the place down, and you're standing right next to them, that they'd shoot you too, wouldn't you? They didn't.
According to the defense theory, at least one of the assailants was still in the trailer after Hans, Betty, and Donnie escaped. It was only then that Jill was shot.
And the perpetrator then exited the trailer. That person put the gun back in the car, threw it back in the car as he was running by, and those persons ran to their car and jumped in, and off they went.
You're going to commit a murder, don't you bring the instruments to do that job? Don't you bring the gun? If you're going to burn down the house, don't you bring the gas? How convenient for them that both of these items just happen to be provided by Donald Hansen. Makes no sense.
However, the jury believed it did make sense, and they found Donnie Hansen not guilty.
When I first heard the verdict, my initial reaction was I was really happy to think that he didn't do it. But when I thought back to everything, I knew that Donnie's involved, that Donnie knew what happened, and he knew what went on that night, and he has all the answers.
This has been a real tragedy to us because we have lost 3 of our 4 children out of this. 2 of them are dead, and Donnie's dead to me because I do feel he was 100% responsible for this, whether he pulled it off 100% himself or not.
If I know who would have done this, I would not have put my life on the line through a jury trial, through a death penalty case to cover them up for someone that killed my sisters that I loved. You know, a statement like that is absolutely ludicrous.
Because of the notoriety surrounding the trial, Donnie has changed his name. He asked that we alter his voice and obscure his face during this exclusive interview.
There's no, I realize that nothing has been done or has been done since my acquittal to take steps to solve this case. I think the only way this case will ever be solved is if someone's conscience gets to them.
Donnie's account is still the subject of debate. Although his attorney claimed Donnie was awakened by the shotgun blast, Donnie now says he never heard the shot.
No one that was in that trailer that night heard any blasts. So I don't know how I didn't hear it. I don't know how any of us didn't hear it as a group. But we're all fairly consistent. None of us heard anything.
Another nagging question is why Donnie removed the shotgun from his car before anyone knew that his shotgun had been involved or even that a crime had been committed.
I don't really know why I moved it, other than I didn't want the gun to, someone steal it, someone find the gun and think, I did this, if it was used in the commission of this crime. At that time, I didn't know if it had been or not.
A third incident was also difficult to reconcile. Donnie's 5 a.m. visit to the warehouse and the explanation he gave police.
It was one of those things in the old story where one lie leads into another and they just start rolling in. And I said, well, I was coming in to check on my dog, which I wasn't really checking on the dog. And I was going back there to get the gun, and that's the story that I told them. But I think that I reacted out of ignorance and out of stupidity, and that's what got me in trouble.
I just came out to feed my dog.
Tell us the truth.
The accusations that I know what went on that night are absolutely ludicrous, because I had absolutely everything to lose and nothing to gain. And the fact that to let someone get away with what they did to Jill and Julie tears me up. It decimates my life, I guess you could say.
The whole truth about this hideous crime may never be known. A jury has acquitted Donnie Hansen, but his mother and stepfather have not.
I believe the insurance policy was part of the motive. The insurance was on me. Donnie came home that night to wipe our family out. He brought the gun with him. He had the gasoline that he'd bought 2 nights previous. And I believe the motive was money. Whether he was by himself or not, I don't know.
You go on, but life is never the same. And you can build a new house or buy a new car, but you can't bring back the girls. And all we have left is memories. And it's really rough.
Jill and Julie Hansen were 15 years old when these home movies were taken. Their parents have never gotten over the brutal crime that tore their family apart. When we return, Will aging love letters lead to a long-lost father? Perhaps with your help. It was the summer of 1955. Maria Hoffman, a 20-year-old exchange student from Germany, found work at the Hotel Moraine, an elegant lakeside resort 26 miles from Chicago. Maria had just finished a year of study in the United States and needed money for the passage home.
Entschuldigen Sie bitte, ich habe Sie nicht gesehen. Ich sollte besser hingucken. Tut mir leid.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Hey, wait a minute. Are we both saying the same thing?
Yes. Yes. You surprised me so much I forgot my English.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
The young man introduced himself as Michael Seymour.
Yes, I'm fine. Are you?
Like Maria, he was in his early 20s.
Here, let me help you.
Thank you, very kind.
Haven't seen you here before. Are you new?
The chance encounter quickly blossomed into a summer romance, but it was a relationship Maria would keep secret for nearly 30 years.
Welcome.
Until the spring of 1983.
How you warming up, Mama? It's a bit cold.
In the ensuing years, Maria had returned to Germany, married, become a mother, and a grandmother. Her oldest son, Christoph, was a lieutenant in the German Air Force. During a weekend visit with him, Maria made a stunning confession.
Chris, there's something I want to talk to you about.
What is it?
This is very difficult. Chris, your father is not your real father.
What?
The man who raised you is not your real father.
Mama, are you serious?
Your real father is a man I met when I was in the United States.
Why haven't you told me this sooner?
When my mother first told me this, I felt a little bit anger about her not telling me before.
I'm your son. I have a right to know.
I made the decision right there that I need to find him, that I need to find out what kind of man he is, that I want to see him and make my own decision whether I like him or not and whether I want to stay in contact with him or not.
How did it happen?
It was the year after I was in school in America.
Over the next hour, Christoph learned more about his biological father and the long secret romance. For Maria and Michael, the attraction had been instant and all-consuming. Together, they spent an enchanted summer.
My mother told me that he was from Canada, that he was a very gentle man, and that she fell in love with this man, and she had an affair with him.
But the carefree love affair was eventually clouded by a very real concern. Maria Hoffman was pregnant.
She was very worried about the future. There she was in a foreign country with basically no fixed income, and her friend, the man she was in love with, obviously didn't have a very high income job either, so they would have had to struggle a lot. I also know that they were in love and that she wanted to be with him.
In October of 1955, Maria made an agonizing decision. She would return to Germany to have her baby without Michael Seymour.
They separated not in anger, they separated in good faith and planned on getting together again later on.
I don't know what to say, Maria.
Neither do I. It's all so confusing.
I know that I'll miss you.
That wasn't an easy way for her, but it was the best way because she could go to the security of her family and had all the support that she needed.
Maria would never again see Michael Seymour. Christoph was born in Germany on May 22, 1956. The following year, Maria married a college professor, the man Christoph would come to know as his father.
Christoph, sit down. There's something I have for you. I have been saving all these years. These are letters from your father. Perhaps it will help you to understand, or at least to have more information.
In all, there were 4 letters, the last written in 1958. Included were 2 snapshots of Michael Seymour. Christoph Bauer, at the age of 27, suddenly found himself staring into the face of his birth father. Christoph immediately followed up the few clues he had. He wrote to the 4 different return addresses on the envelopes. He got no response. Government agencies both in Canada and the United States had no records of Seymour. And the Hotel Moraine, where Christoph's mother and Seymour had met, had long ago burned to the ground. But there was one ray of hope. A cousin of Maria's, who lived in Chicago, said that Michael Seymour had periodically phoned her after Maria returned to Germany.
Have you heard from Maria? Do you know how she's been doing?
To Christoph's amazement, Michael Seymour's occasional calls had continued for nearly 20 years.
And Chris, how's he doing?
When I learned that he had checked on me and that he still was interested in me, I felt supported in my decision to find him. In 1976, this relative moved, and that was the end of the contact.
These are letters.
1 year after her dramatic confession, Maria Bauer died. She was 49 years old. The aging letters she left to Christoph paint a bittersweet picture of youthful love.
I feel any child of yours would be somebody worthwhile. I'm happy to be joined to you through it one way or another, even if by now or in time to come, that is all we have between us. I also want some kind of closer relationship with our son Christopher. I think he is the cutest thing I've ever seen. I received your last letter with the 2 pictures of him on the bicycle and with yourself. I really treasure them.
Today, Christoph Bauer is a captain in the German Air Force. Since 1991, he has lived with his family in the United States, where he is training helicopter pilots for the U.S. Army. Christoph and his family will be returning to Germany next year. Perhaps Michael Seymour can be found before they leave, so he can meet his son and 3 grandchildren for the first time. Recently, Christoph was surprised to learn that the name Michael Seymour is an alias. Seymour's real name is Walter Joseph Anthony Seymour. He was born October 4th, 1930 in Pembroke, Ontario, Canada, and lived in Evanston, Illinois until at least 1970. On our next Unsolved Mysteries, the harrowing tale of 3 young men who escaped from an Oklahoma jail and took to the road armed with a truckload of weapons. After a wild 150-mile chase, state troopers cornered the fugitives, but one of them managed to slip away. The Mona Lisa, one of Leonardo da Vinci's greatest works. The identity of the model is a mystery that has intrigued and baffled historians for 500 years. Now, an unorthodox new theory has sparked a heated debate. Could the model have been Leonardo himself? Join me next time for another edition of Unsolved Mysteries.
Thank you.